Recognizing gaslighting in real life requires both knowledge and intuition because its signs hide in plain sight. Unlike more overt patterns of abuse, gaslighting works best precisely because it wears a mask of care, concern, even warmth. For many, it may begin as a parent correcting a child's memory for their supposed benefit, a lover insisting that they only want the best, a boss shaping a team's reality to keep things running smoothly. Victims, eager for harmony, may ignore small red flags, rationalize repeated denials, and make peace with emotional confusion for the simple privilege of belonging. What are these red flags in practice? It starts with a gnawing sense that reality does not add up. Facts are regularly questioned or flat out denied, and after every interaction with the manipulator, the victim feels less sure of their own mind. The confusion worsens over time, not in one dramatic explosion, but through 1,000 tiny moments. The partner who says, "You're imagining things," when the evidence is clear as day. The friend who always pivots blame to others, never accepting responsibility. The leader who uses selective memory to rewrite collective history and silence dissent. The victim, doubting themselves, will often withdraw from debate, preferring the solace of silence to the chaos of confrontation. Personal boundaries begin to evaporate. The gaslighter may intrude on private decisions, criticize hobbies, opinions, or relationships without pause. Victims rationalize these invasions, blaming themselves for wanting autonomy. Maybe I am too selfish. Maybe I need to compromise more. Over time, this erasure of boundaries means the victim stops asserting their needs, stops trusting their gut, and eventually loses the sense that they deserve agency at all. A powerful sign is the change in emotions. Gaslighting is a roller coaster. Victims find themselves running anxious internal dialogues, constantly rehearsing conversations, triple-checking details, suppressing emotions, seeking external validation in desperate attempts to confirm what they once knew internally. The victim learns to spot punishment and reward cycles. At times, the manipulator showers with affection and praise. At other times, they abruptly withdraws, tone-walling, ignoring, or even mocking the victim. This unpredictability trains the victim to be hyper-vigilant, walking on eggshells to avoid the next punishment. Isolation often follows. Like camouflage, it is not achieved in a single act, but through gradual engineering. Sowing doubt among friends about the victim's reliability or honesty, subtly excluding them from gatherings, making sly comments under the guise of jokes, or manipulating stories to turn potential allies against the victim. The end goal is clear: a gaslit individual surrounded only by the gaslighter and deprived of anyone who can provide outside perspective. The more isolated the person becomes, the deeper the dependence grows. Physical symptoms become more pronounced. Long-term stress rewires brain circuitry, leading to headaches, insomnia, upset stomach, chronic fatigue, skin outbreaks, appetite changes, panic attacks, anxiety disorders even. In some cases, physiological ailments that mimic organic illness. Because gaslighting robs the victim of confidence and courage to seek help, many suffer in silence, visiting doctors for vague symptoms, never realizing the origin is psychological sabotage. Consider Michael's story. He worked under a supervisor who, for years, undermined his professional narrative. Meetings were rescheduled and denied. Deadlines were changed and blamed on Michael. Every complaint, however rational, was turned against him, making him seem unreasonable or uncommitted. At first, Michael documented every exchange obsessively, hoping to regain reality via proof. But each time he presented facts, his boss accused him of paranoia stubbornness, poor teamwork. Michael's performance reviews dropped, his friendships at work eroded, and he became anxious, withdrawn, afraid of even speaking the truth. It was only after connecting with another exemplary who shared similar stories that Michael realized what had happened. Not incompetence, but the systematic rewriting of reality to consolidate his boss's power. Sophia's account is equally haunting. Her relationship began in a blaze of intimacy, deep conversations, mutual vulnerability, passionate vows, but gradually, her partner began rewriting conversations, denying promises, deflecting blame, and withholding affection. Sophia gave in wanting to save love, but day by day her world shrank into perpetual uncertainty. When she reached out to friends, her partner claimed, "They're jealous. They want us to fail." When she tried to remember conversations, he would laugh. "There you go again, always forgetting." Eventually, Sophia started journaling every detail, compiling months of evidence. Armed with external validation from a therapist and survivor forums, she ended the relationship. The scars remain: hesitation, self-doubt, anxiety, but Sophia's reality is now her own, no longer for another to define. Group gaslighting also devastates organizations. In toxic workplaces, leaders may pit workers against each other, rewrite history, or punish dissent. Gaslighting may take the form of mixed signals and clear expectations, contradictory instructions, selective blame. Workers struggle to communicate, lose confidence, experience rising anxiety, and even physical symptoms. In some cases, entire teams collapse. Mental health issues skyrocket as reality slips away. When employees are finally able to compare notes and realize they've all been manipulated, there remains the daunting challenge of reclaiming truth and rebuilding trust. Family gaslighting is particularly corrosive because it often begins in childhood. For Alex, every emotional outburst or tale of hurt was met with parental denials that never happened. Stop exaggerating. Each time he remembered an incident, his parents insisted it was fantasy. Alex grew into adulthood racked by guilt and uncertainty, scared to speak up, over-reliant on others to validate his thoughts and feelings. Only after extensive therapy did Alex unravel the web. Gaslighting can last a lifetime, but it can also be reversed. Experts offer clear guidance. Dr. Rubinstein, author of The Gaslight Effect, urges survivors to. She teaches that gaslighting always begins with doubt often planted by someone trusted or loved. Naming the manipulation, keeping careful journals, seeking outside perspectives, and rebuilding networks of support are core steps. Others, like counselor Shahida Arabi, highlight the importance of setting boundaries, recognizing emotional triggers, and learning the patterns of manipulative communication before engagement. Among the warning signs to track: recurring self-doubt or confusion after interaction. Memory lapses explained away by others that never happened, minimizing or mocking your feelings. You're too sensitive. Disproportionate guilt when expressing pain or frustration. Emotional volatility, constant up and down in response to one person. Withdrawal from support networks, increasing dependence on the manipulator for what's real. Patterns of denial, deflection, and manipulation when you challenge facts. Not all recovery is about confrontation. Sometimes healing means quietly creating emotional or physical distance, practicing boundaries, rebuilding lost connections, and finding validation outside the manipulator's reach. Support groups and survivor communities provide language, education, and the power of shared experience. Therapy assists with reframing damaging narratives, rebuilding self-esteem, and restoring emotional equilibrium. Recovery is possible for everyone. Victims who learn to self-validate, journal experiences, seek external feedback, and surround themselves with affirming voices begin to tighten the threads of reality once torn apart. They learned that even if their pain was invisible to others, it was always real, and that reclaiming truth is a journey, not a single step. In our next section, we will dive into practical strategies to defend against gaslighting. From essential communication skills and legal protections to cultivating emotional resilience, philosophical clarity, and developing communities of trust in a world that too often prefers harmony over truth. Defending yourself against gaslighting is not a single action, but an ongoing practice of self-respect, critical awareness, and strategic action. While the manipulator's force is confusion, your power is clarity. The first, most crucial step is witnessing your own experience fully before trying to explain or justify it. Write down your daily accounts as vividly as possible. Emotions felt, words exchanged, gestures, even moments that seemed insignificant. Over time, a holistic picture emerges: patterns of manipulation, repeated denials, and the slow erosion of confidence. These records aren't just artifacts. They become your shield against revisionist attacks. Don't underestimate the value of technology in building your safety nets. Today, apps exist for journaling encrypted thoughts, safely archiving messages or photos, even sending time-stamped audio reflections. When digital communication is a battleground, take regular screenshots of critical chats, save emails externally, and keep records on a device inaccessible to the manipulator. Most importantly, recognize that technology, while empowering, also exposes vulnerabilities. Be mindful of privacy. Secure your digital tools and never share passwords or sensitive access with anyone who has shown manipulatively tendencies. Your support system is the next pillar. The most effective resistance to gaslighting comes from voices outside the manipulator's reach. If traditional friends or family fall short, seek support online. There are global forums, survivor communities, peer chat aplicativos, professionals who dedicate work to validating experiences like yours. Join groups focused on emotional abuse, education, recovery, and empowerment. They don't just affirm your truth, but actively teach strategies and language to confront manipulation. Personal connection, whether remote or in person, erases isolation and provides real-time perspective when doubt creeps in. Assertive communication is as much a skill as any craft. Cultivate the ability to express observations calmly and specifically. It bothers me when my feelings are dismissed. I notice you often change the subject when I raise concerns. Avoid both attack and submission. The goal is to narrate your reality without negotiating its validity. When pressed, repeat core statements. My experience is real, and I am allowed to express it. Over time, clarity increases, and the manipulator's tactics lose force. Strategic inquiry is a subtle but powerful tool. Instead of defending every memory, ask for transparency request, written summaries of agreements, record meetings. Ask the manipulator to clarify their position in group emails or text, in workplace or family settings. Bring in neutral third parties when possible. Many gaslighters break the pattern when exposed to collective accountability, while persistent manipulation in group contexts can be documented for HR or legal action. Boundaries, strict yet flexible, should become habitual. Define limits for conversations, time spent debating, topics allowed, behaviors. Use phrases like, "If you continue to insult me, I will leave this discussion," or "I need a break. I'll revisit this issue when I feel respected." Boundaries might mean muting digital platforms during stressful cycles, declining invitations to conflict-prone gatherings, or re-establishing physical space even at home. You are never obligated to endure communication that leaves you anxious, unsafe, or confused. Isolation must be countered by open doors. If manipulation cuts you off from friends, make deliberate efforts to expand your network community classes, volunteer efforts, professional groups, creative projects, social clubs. Small acts like texting forgotten friends or joining recovery workshops reintegrate you into communities beyond the abuser's control. Therapeutic intervention is a sanctuary. Trauma-informed counselors, abuse specialists, and peer recovery mentors provide tools unavailable elsewhere. Exercises to rebuild emotional regulation, cognitive reframing techniques, grief processing, guided boundary practice. In session, you can dissect old stories, spot buried patterns, and rehearse new responses, all in a space free from manipulation. Modern therapy also includes digital sessions, anonymity, and group support, lowering barriers to entry and increasing safety. Never neglect legal possibilities. Document harassment with clear dates, witnesses, and records. Learn when to involve law enforcement, workplace mediation, advocacy groups, mental health protection orders, in divorce, custody, employment, and family court. A well-constructed timeline supported by correspondence, witness accounts, therapists, note exchanges, outcomes. Consult professionals before escalation. Know when to disengage and keep your options open. Safety comes before every other consideration. Cultivate resilience as a daily discipline. Breathwork, mindfulness, meditation, positive affirmations, regular exercise, balanced diet, creative passions. These small steps add up, repairing neural connections damaged by prolonged stress. Many survivors find resilience in art, music, movement, nature, spirituality, laughter, and written reflection. Over time, your sense of self becomes anchored by what brings peace, not by constant vigilance for danger. Knowledge is power. Read survivor memoirs, psychology books, articles about manipulation and emotional abuse. Watch documentaries or lectures from specialists in trauma and recovery. Attend webinars or interactive courses on assertiveness, emotional intelligence, digital safety, education, crafts, new language. The more you know, the less likely you are to become ensnared by the old tactics. Tell your story and reclaim your voice, whether in a private journal, anonymous forum, or social media thread. Sharing experience turns pain into wisdom. Your narrative never needs approval, but when heard and affirmed by others, it becomes a lighthouse in the fog for both you and the next survivor. Silence breeds shame. Speaking up breeds empowerment and connection. Remember that leaving is courage, not weakness. The hardest part of healing from gaslighting is choosing self-protection over toxic harmony. You are under no obligation to fix a manipulator or prove the impact of their actions. Your exit is not an act of abandonment, but of self-respect. Sometimes recovery means walking away, closing the door, and starting anew where your mind will be honored. Listen to your intuition. Long before the conscious mind recognizes abuse, the body and spirit know. Pay attention to tension, sadness, anxiety, relief, or confusion. These are signposts on the journey back to the truth. Every time you mistrust vague explanations or excuses, pause and ask yourself, would someone who loved me want me to doubt myself this way? Each step into awareness, setting boundaries, seeking support, learning more, telling your story is resistance. The war for your mind is won not by defeating the gaslighter in argument, but by refusing to surrender your reality day after day. There is no right way to recover, Only your way, guided by honesty, supported by community, defended by the newfound wisdom that your story and sanity are priceless. In the final chapter, we will explore why the defense of truth is not just about survival, but about meaning, hope, and redefining strength in a world often fascinated by dominance and illusion. When gaslighting ends, when the fog at last starts to lift, the journey is not simply about recovering facts, resetting relationships, or rebuilding routines. It is about regaining the most essential thing an abuser tries to steal: your trust in yourself and your faith that truth can and should belong to you. The aftermath of manipulation brings philosophical questions to the surface. What is reality when it has been so expertly distorted? Can you ever be sure of your own mind? How does a person learn to believe in their perceptions again? Throughout history, thinkers, philosophers, scientists, poets have all asked, how do I know that what I know is true? Some say reality is simply what endures scrutiny. Others claim it's crafted by consensus, power, or even repetition. In an age of algorithms, misinformation, and curated self, these questions become central for everyone, not just survivors. But for a person who has endured gaslighting, reality is not a social agreement. It is personal, intimate, and fragile. Recovery after manipulation is a process of reconstructing the self, not just the facts of one's story, but the meaning, emotion, and value that were lost. Healing is rarely linear. On some days, trust returns easily. On others, the old voices rise again, casting shadows over progress. It's normal to find yourself questioning memories, meanings, motives, even your worth. Yet each act of self-validation, each moment of resisting lies, is a victory. Confidence is rebuilt, one sentence, one boundary, one breath at a time. Resilience is born not out of a lack of pain, but out of willingness to transform pain into wisdom. Survivors of gaslighting become more compassionate, more curious, less willing to accept vague explanations, and more able to acknowledge complexity. They learn to ask deeper questions, to respect intuition, to own vulnerability as strength rather than weakness. They become torchbearers for authenticity in a world of distraction, domination, and denial. It's important to recognize that hope seldom appears as a loud revelation. Most of the time, it arrives quietly at the edge of doubt, a gentle reminder to check in, to speak out, to give oneself permission to feel and remember. The act of telling your story aloud, in writing, through art, or in silent reflection restores the sense of agency. It's declaration. This is what happened. This is what I feel. This is what I need. Is not just a step to recovery, but a statement of existence. In defending your personal reality, you are also defending meaning and human dignity for everyone. Look beyond your personal story to see broader patterns. The world is full of noise, conflicts based not just on facts, but on narratives, identities, and struggles for belonging. Truth is contested territory, but your feelings and perceptions are facts that exist regardless of outside validation. By holding firm, by setting boundaries, by refusing manipulation, you become a guardian of meaning in a society desperate for authenticity. Remember, too, that every journey is unique. There is no deadline for healing, no universal template for reclaiming trust or agency. Some will rebuild quickly. Others will spend weeks, months, or years just learning to believe in themselves again. Celebrate the small breakthroughs, the first moments you catch a manipulator in a lie. The first day, a boundary is respected. Every time you feel relief from anxiety after choosing truth, let philosophy serve as a companion, not a barrier. The question, what is real, becomes what is real for me. right now. Build your life atop this living foundation, adjusting as new knowledge comes. Expand your world with art, connection, learning, and service to others. Every time you help someone else out of manipulation, you deepen your own roots and extend the leaves of hope. Gaslighting does not succeed because you are weak. It succeeds because you are strong enough to trust, to seek harmony, to believe in the goodness of others. Claim that strength. Rename it. Let the pain turn to wisdom. Let the loss become purpose. Let the confusion become clarity. You are not a victim of your history. You are the creator of your future. For all who are listening, if your life contains doubt after manipulation, know that your feelings matter. There is no shame in asking for help, setting new boundaries, or leaving behind what tries to erase you. Your story is not segmented by what others did, but by what you choose to build next in honesty, connection, and courage. As the fog clears, as reality regains color and shape, share what you learned. Help someone else rebuild. Become part of a community that resists deception and upholds truth. Your agency changes more than your life. It changes every life you touch. Thank you for taking this journey to the very edge of reality and back. Stay curious, stay brave, and above all, stay true to yourself. When you defend your inner world, you protect hope for everyone. The light you carry forwards, not just for you, it is the spark for a new story, a new world, and a new freedom. What if, without warning, every certainty about your identity could be not by accident or illness, but by the quiet will of someone you trust? Imagine waking each morning with the sense that something is subtly wrong. The words spoken around you don't align with your memory. The atmosphere shifts, objects move, but when you ask, no one else notices. You're left questioning if you did, in fact, hear what you thought you did yesterday, or if the look on your partner's face meant what you believed it did the night before. This sense of perpetual uncertainty isn't the work of ghosts or fate. It's the product of a deliberate psychological attack known as gaslighting. Is so much more than being called crazy. It's a slowly tightening noose around reality. The systematic, calculated dismantling of your trust in your thoughts and memories. It infects intimate relationships, families, friendships, workplaces, entire cultures. The reason it is so globally feared today is precisely because its signs are easy to miss, and because the very act of questioning whether you are being gaslit is in itself what gaslighting causes. The cycle feeds itself. A victim begins to doubt. Doubts lead to confusion. Confusion breeds dependency. Dependency deepens the manipulation. Suddenly, the victim clings to the gaslighter, desperate for answers only they will provide, blind to the fact that those answers are precisely what perpetuate the psychological prison. The origin of the term is both literary and legendary. In 1938, the play Gaslight gripped audiences with its chilling portrayal of a husband meticulously warping his wife's perception of reality. He dims the lights, removes objects from her reach, denies ever having done so, and as his lies stack up, her sense of self unravels. By the end, her reality is no longer her own, it's whatever he says it is. This story, dramatized in the iconic film adaptation, gave the world a template for understanding subtle, insidious forms of abuse that leave no bruises, but rather shatter one's grip on the truth. But gaslighting didn't begin there. It's a phenomenon as old as power itself. Throughout history, gaslighting has been weaponized more frequently than most of us realize. In ancient courts, sycophants and would-be usurpers rewrote stories, altered timelines, and planted seeds of doubt for kings and queens to unseat rivals. Modern politics run on gaslighting. Think of campaigns that repeatedly deny proven facts, where repeated falsehood overwhelms the public's ability to sort fiction from reality. In mass media, clever advertisements manipulate perceptions until you wonder if you ever liked your own body, your own style, your own choices. In the digital age, social networks are breeding grounds for new gaslighting forms. Technology offers unprecedented means of blurring the lines. Deepfakes alter history. Influencers curate realities. Entire online mobs can rewrite reputations in seconds. Gaslighting is no longer something that happens to a single person. It can happen to millions all at once. But on a personal level, the most devastating gaslighting happens up close, often at home or in relationships. Parents may insist that their children remember wrong. Partners might say you're always making things up. Friends may argue away your emotions until you're convinced you're unreasonable. Gaslighting isn't limited to romantic love. Siblings do it to siblings, teachers to students, managers to employees. The common thread is an imbalance of power and the need to control the other's understanding of reality. Why does it work so effectively? The answer lies deep in human psychology. Our brains are designed to seek validation, to confirm what we think with the perspectives of others, especially those we love or rely on. Social harmony depends on some level of agreement. If everyone in a group says it happened this way, most members will suppress dissenting memory even when they suspect otherwise. This evolutionary legacy makes us exceptionally vulnerable. Connection and acceptance are so fundamentally important that, when forced to choose between being right and belonging, most people will betray themselves for the comfort of the group or the relationship. Gaslighters exploit this. Their denials and distortions carefully manipulate this ancient desire until the victim's need for unity overtakes their need for truth. Consider the experience of someone gaslit over years. They start by defending their perspective. They insist on what they remember. The gaslighter responds with disbelief, corrections, or ridicule. The victim learns it's safer to stop arguing, but the unease grows. Small incidents become big. Forgetting where you put your keys, realizing that a story you told was wrong, missing a detail in a conversation. The gaslighter is always there to point it out, to reframe what really happened. Each time, the self-doubt deepens maybe. It is your fault, your memory, your emotionality. Eventually, the victim begins to check themselves against the gaslighter on every subject, until the gaslighter becomes not just a partner, parent, or boss, but the guardian of reality itself. Children of gaslighted households have described growing up in a fog. You'll learn not to trust what your own senses tell you, because what matters is how it will be spun afterwards. You question, but you are taught never to question for long. Eventually, you learn to anticipate how your experience will be denied, and so you deny it yourself before the confrontation can even happen. This is the legacy of strategic psychological abuse. It builds feedback loops inside the mind where manipulation outlasts the manipulator. Now, let's be clear. Not every disagreement or minor conflict is genuine memory lapses, emotional misunderstandings, or even defensive arguments are part of life. Gaslighting is characterized by patterns, consistent, repeated actions aimed at undermining reality across time. One slip is human. A campaign is gas. The true difference is intention. The gaslighter's motive is dominance, control, and survival, even at the cost of the other's wholeness. Science has begun to catch up with these truths. Studies in social psychology show how susceptible we are to authority, to groupthink, to repetition, The famous Asch conformity experiments revealed that most people, when faced with unanimous opposition, will deny the evidence before their eyes to align with a group, even when that evidence was as simple as the length of a line on a card. In more recent studies of abusive relationships, psychologists have documented the cascade of symptoms caused by long-term gaslighting: chronic anxiety, loss of confidence, memory impairment, depression, and even dissociation, where victims lose touch with their real selves as a form of psychological suffering. The tragedy is that so many victims of gaslighting are not weak-willed or naive. Often, they are highly sensitive, intelligent, deeply empathetic. People precisely, the types who want to resolve conflict, preserve peace, avoid harming others. Gaslighting thrives in those who value harmony. Gaslighters often target people celebrated for their kindness or loyalty, knowing they are less likely to retaliate, less likely to break bonds. Their empathy becomes a weapon used against them. Technology, while increasing awareness, has also made gaslighting easier. Instant messaging and social media mean gaslighters can rewrite the timeline of events in minutes, deleting messages, editing posts, fabricating entire conversations. Digital gaslighting, as researchers call it, is the manipulation of online evidence to force victims into accepting false narratives. In an era where screenshots are proof, the ability to manufacture proof has become its own trap. But here is a chilling fact. Almost no one realizes they're being gaslit when it begins. The power of gaslighting is that it creeps. Days blur into weeks. The little lies and denials seem unimportant at first. Gradually, the victim becomes quieter, hesitant, mistrustful of their own mind. Friends and family may notice they're not themselves, but the victim often finds it impossible to explain what's wrong. How do you say, "I just don't know what's true anymore"? How do you ask for help for something you can't prove? And yet, gaslighting has a pattern. These tactics: denial, diversion, blame, isolation, and contradiction form the scaffolding. The skilled manipulator uses these like a chess master, always thinking 2 moves ahead. The aim is not just to win an argument, but to dominate the very field upon which arguments can be understood. A gaslighter doesn't just want to be right. They want the other person to surrender the right to be right. Now consider a world where gaslighting is the norm, where politicians, corporations, celebrities compete not to persuade, but to erase the public's grip on facts. In such a climate, personal gaslighting escalates. Victims become more confused because the world outside seems to echo the uncertainty inside. Reality feels provisional, negotiable, subjective. The loss of common understanding breeds division, anxiety, and a desperate search for authority that promises stability. As we dive deeper into this labyrinth, we will identify the phases of gaslighting, how it begins with charm, how it escalates through contradiction, how it consumes through isolation, and how it ends in dependence or despair. Each phase will be illustrated with stories, science, and voices from survivors who found their way out or continue to search for an exit. But before we enter, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever silenced yourself to keep the peace? Have you ever needed someone to confirm what you knew was true, just to be sure? If so, you have already felt the pull of God. The good news is, knowledge is power. Once you recognize the pattern, the spell begins to break. The goal of this episode is not just to terrify, but to liberate, to give you the tools to reclaim your reality and, if needed, help others do the same. Let's begin this journey together. will see the invisible shed light on the artful erasure gaslighters. Practice and find out, once and for all, what's left of ourselves after the fog clears. Gaslighting doesn't announce itself with thunder or rage. It arrives quietly in a series of phases, each more entangling than the last. At first, it may look like care, concern, or even romance. The gaslighter appears as the perfect partner, parent, friend, colleague. They listen intently, validate every emotion, remember every detail you share. This is the charm phase, and its purpose is to create trust, a vital ingredient for manipulation. Often, victims of gaslighting recall the beginning as a dream. They felt seen, special, chosen. In friendships, the gaslighter establishes rapid closeness. In families, they may play the favorite who can do no wrong. The stage is set for dependency, but the victim has no idea what's coming. As comfort and trust solidify, the second phase begins contradiction. Small changes appear in conversations, often masked in humor or gentle corrections. Are you sure you remember that? I think it happened differently. The victim dismisses the contradiction as innocent, believing it's normal to misremember. Yet, gradually, contradiction becomes a pattern. Arguments. The gaslighter begins to rewrite events retrospectively. You told me not to call, when in reality, they never did. The aim here is to destabilize the victim's memory and narrative. At first, it feels like playful debates. Over time, the victim begins to yield more often, doubting their own clarity, conceding points simply to keep the peace. The third phase, escalation, is marked by mounting denial, blame shifting, and diversion. When confronted, the gaslighter outright denies clear facts. You're just imagining things. You're being too sensitive. You always make a big deal out of nothing. Evidence becomes meaningless not because it's absent, but because its interpretation is controlled by the gaslighter. Diversion enters the stage. Instead of discussing the issue at hand, the gaslighter changes the subject, brings up past actions, or accuses the victim of unrelated problems. Blame shifting is a common maneuver. Suddenly, the victim finds themselves apologizing for feeling hurt, for having forgotten, for not being understanding. Isolation is the tool of phase 4. As confusion grows, the victim's social support network erodes by design or consequence. Gaslighters may subtly encourage the victim to mistrust friends, withdraw from family, sabotage connections. They might say, "Your friends don't care about you," or "No one else understands the problems we face." As outside perspectives are shut out, the gaslighter becomes the sole mirror for truth and validation. In workplaces, this can happen as toxic bosses pit team members against each other, controlling the flow of information so facts come only from above. The fifth phase is dependence. Having surrendered their sense of reality, victims now depend on the gaslighter, not only for validation, but sometimes for identity itself. Every feeling, memory, reaction is filtered through the manipulator. The victim may check in before making decisions, seek approval before voicing an opinion, hold back doubt for fear of being labeled unstable. Tactics intensify. Revision of history. Denying the existence of statements. Attacking character and weaponizing secrets shared in confidence. The process attacks emotional safety, self-worth, and often the will to seek help. The final phase is collapsor. In rare cases, awakening. If left unchecked, long-term gaslighting can yield deep psychological harm. Depression, anxiety, chronic self-doubt, even dissociation. In the collapse, the victim may lose the motivation to fight, may accept the fabricated reality, or self-isolate entirely. But sometimes a crisis, perhaps a new voice, evidence, or simply exhaustion triggers awakening. This moment is rarely explosive. It's more like clarity emerging from fog. The victim realizes the patterns for what they are, feels indignation, and may quietly begin to reach for support outside the gaslighter's sphere. To understand the tactics of gaslighting so you can recognize and guard against them, let's examine some common strategies. The most fundamental is denial. A gaslighter's default setting is to deny reality, shifting focus onto the victim. If you say, "You told me you'd be here at 7, they answer, "No, you misunderstood. I never said that." This denial is strategic. It chips away at your confidence, makes you re-examine conversations you thought you'd understood. Diversion diverts attention. When the issue gets uncomfortable, the manipulator launches into accusations or questions about your motives. Why are you always so negative? Isn't it amazing how you always have to make everything about you? Suddenly, you're defending yourself, not your memory. Blame shifting is powerful. The gaslighter intentionally turns the tables, suggesting you're at fault for any disagreement. If you weren't so sensitive, this wouldn't happen. You always turn things into drama. The victim starts to believe their emotions are the true problem, not the external behavior. Revision of history targets your very perception. Gaslighters can make statements like, "That never happened. You must be fantasizing again." They may bring up events that never transpired or distort real situations until the victim can distinguish fact from invention. Another tactic is withholding. The gaslighter refuses to engage, punishes you with silence, withdraws affection, avoids questions. This makes the victim desperate for any communication, teaching them that speaking honestly results in abandonment. Projection is yet another weapon at us. When a gaslighter accuses you of traits or behaviors they themselves display. For example, a manipulator who routinely lies may berate the victim for being dishonest. This makes confusion complete as the victim frantically examines their own actions for faults that never existed. Gaslighting often combines these techniques. A manipulator may start with denial, escalate to blame shifting, employ withholding, and finally present as the injured, misunderstood party. This victim role throws the real victim off balance, eroding their inclination to defend themselves. But why does gaslighting affect so many? Partly, it's because relationships rely on trust. We don't expect those closest to us to rewrite our reality. We expect them to help us verify it. When trust becomes a weapon, the victim is forced to choose, believe in themselves, and risk losing the relationship, or preserve harmony and let go of what feels true. Most people, out of fear, love, or loyalty, choose the latter, making gaslighting not simply about lying, but about transforming love into secrecy. Furthermore, societal messages reinforce this. Cultural norms often discourage confrontation, especially in families, hierarchies, and romantic partnerships. Don't make trouble. Forgive and forget. It's all just in your head. These mantras lay fertile ground for manipulation because they elevate harmony over authenticity. Children who survive gaslighting at home often become adults who question their own feelings, struggle to advocate for themselves, or fall into new abusive relations. The legacy continues unless the cycle is broken by awareness, education, and the courageous act of naming the manipulation. Gaslighting's impact extends beyond the mind. It affects physical health, career trajectory, creative expression, even spiritual life. Victims describe feeling adrift, unable to trust even their own decisions. Chronic stress from psychological abuse changes brain chemistry. In severe cases, the victim may experience anxiety disorders, depressive episodes, panic attacks, and social withdrawal. So, what does awakening look like? Sometimes it's a slow build. Evidence accumulates and cracks appear in the manipulator's story. Other times, the process is sudden. A new relationship, a trusted friend, a journal of events, or discovering other similar stories. Awakening is less about triumph than discovery. I see what's happened. I see how it works. I can begin to reclaim my reality. In the episodes to come, we will break down each tactic, its signs and symptoms, and the stories of those who fought through the fog. We will show that knowledge is the first step in resistance and validation the next. Because the final truth gaslighters fear is this: once a victim sees the game, the power begins to slip away. Gaslighting is not monolithic. It is a collection of psychological tactics, each designed to undermine confidence, question reality, and breed dependency on the manipulator. To truly grasp how gaslighting behaves, we need to dissect these tactics one by one, tracing how they operate and why even the most self-assured people can fall prey. Let's begin with denial, the bedrock maneuver. Denial isn't merely rejecting statements. It's the repeated assertion that actual events, behaviors, or conversations never occurred. If confronted about a broken promise, the gaslighter insists that never happened, you made it up. When the pattern repeats, the victim finds themselves frantically searching memories or texts for proof over time, second-guessing their own recall more than the gaslighter's version. With each incident, reality is experienced by the victim's slips, replaced by the manipulator's narrative. Next, there's minimization. Gaslighters belittle concerns, feelings, or traumas, framing them as insignificant or exaggerated. You're blowing this way out of proportion, or you're always so dramatic. Minimization is effective because it makes the victim feel selfish or childish for expressing discomfort. By trivializing pain, the manipulator plants an inner critic inside the victim, who then becomes hesitant to speak up, fearing the ridicule that always follows. Distortion is subtle. A gaslighter takes three events but rearranges their meaning, intent, or consequence. Sure, I said that, but I was joking. Or, you're twisting everything, can't you see? It was never about that. Victims are caught in mental knots, forced to reanalyze their own interpretations constantly. They may start apologizing for misunderstandings while the manipulator enjoys the reshaping of the story. Deflection is omnipresent. Instead of focusing on a victim's concern, the gaslighter pivots to another issue, often one that puts the victim in a defensive posture. Let's not talk about me being late. Why do you always have to control everything? The victim's legitimate need is drowned out by the manipulator's probing questions and critical attacks. The topic at hand is lost, and the argument is controlled by the gaslighter's terms. Withholding and stonewalling are advanced tactics. The gaslighter refuses to communicate, answer questions, or participate emotionally. In relationships, this can look like hours or days of silence after a disagreement without explanation. Withholding is intentionally ambiguous. The victim is left harrowing over what caused the silence, sometimes apologizing for offenses they don't understand. If the victim seeks clarification, they get vague, evasive responses. It's nothing. I don't want to talk about it. The message is clear. The victim's feelings don't matter, and they must work harder to regain communication. Countering is a method where the gaslighter questions the victim's memory, perceptions, or logic, even when the victim is certain of her experience. Are you sure? That doesn't sound right at all. Even if others confirm the victim's version, the gaslighter remains relentless, insisting on their own revision. This constant countering leads the victim to distrust their own senses, eroding independence. Changing the subject is another way to seize control. During confrontation, the manipulator interjects unrelated points to scatter focus. This may look like shifting from one grievance to another, juggling multiple claims until the victim is too overwhelmed to pursue any. The perpetrator appears dissatisfied, but the confusion and exhaustion ensure the victim eventually retracts their concerns. Projection and accusation serve to plant seeds of guilt throughout the victim's psyche. Gaslighters frequently accuse their targets of behaviors or intentions they themselves harbor. A jealous partner accuses the victim of infidelity. An angry parent claims the child is always mad at me. Projection not only diverts attention, but can make the victim a self-monitoring, apologetic figure who is always worried about being the problem. Isolation is progressed through gossip, rumor, and triangulation. The manipulator may cast aspersions on the victim's support network, spread confidential information, or engineer conflicts among friends and colleagues. Isolation deprives the victim of validation, leaving them solely dependent upon the gas. This tactic is often insidious. Victims may not realize they may become isolated until they have no more confidants left. Finally, victim playing completes the arsenal. When the victim resists, the gaslighter portrays themselves as misunderstood, oppressed, or even in crisis, appealing to pity or remorse. They might cry, claim to be mentally ill, or insist the victim has hurt them deeply. This reversal encourages the victim to abandon her own pain and comfort the manipulator instead, a dynamic called trauma. Over time, the victim may feel it is their duty to heal the gaslighter, and emotional confusion grows ever deeper. The effectiveness of these tactics depends on repetition, subtlety, and escalation. Rarely are they used all at once. More often, they appear as patterns, sometimes camouflaged as concern, care, or intelligence. The gaslighter may even sound wise, convincing, experienced. Their manipulations will often be shrouded in advice for your own good, tough love, or honest feedback. Victims long to believe their suffering is a misunderstanding, not malign intent, because the alternative, a trusted person wants to erase who you are, is nearly unbearable. Why do manipulations succeed so frequently? For many, it begins with fear, the fear of losing love, community, or safety. Victims may rationalize gaslighting until the version becomes easier to accept than struggle. Sometimes it's doubt. A lifetime of being criticized or devalued has left them with fragile boundaries. For others, loyalty or empathy overrides self-protection. They have problems too. Maybe I am too sensitive. I'll just try harder to be better. Self-gaslighting is the final barrier. After enduring repeated mind games, victims internalize the manipulator's voice, doubting and attacking themselves. They may replay each conversation, searching for where they went wrong. Eventually, they believe the pain is their fault, that reality is negotiable and truth is relative. Escaping these mental traps is a heroic act. It requires rebuilding self-trust, finding outside perspective, and sometimes letting go of identities shaped in toxic environments. For some, therapy offers a mirror and a map. For others, communities of survivors provide the language and validation missing for years. Recovery is gradual, and like waking from a long dream, can be confusing, painful, and revelatory. Yet it begins with recognizing the tactics, naming the abuse, and refusing ever again to surrender your whole on truth. In the next section, we'll explore survivor stories, expert insights, and practical signs to spot gaslighting before it has a chance to take root.